Made up of former Capcom developers, Inti Creates was founded in 1998 and has mostly made a career out of ripping off dead franchises and sometimes dragging their creators out of retirement to try to sell them. The genesis of this was Keji Inafune giving them a chance to make a Mega Man game because he didn't feel like doing it himself. The company was given free reign besides Inafune demanding his OC Zero be in it. In 2002 they released Mega Man Zero, which would later go on to a DS re-release in Mega Man Zero Collection, the version I'm playing it on for this video, and then a release on PC, Switch, Xbox One, and PS4 as part of the Mega Man Zero/ZX Legacy Collection. Mega Man Zero is similar but different to the Mega Man X series. Alongside the series staples, run, jump, shoot, Zero can dash and wall jump, much like X, which adds a layer of complexity to the platforming. On top of this, he has a Z-Saber, a melee attack that the game primarily focuses around. Zero can charge either his blaster or his saber to boost their power, but unlike earlier games in the series, there's also a leveling system for weapons. The more they're used, the more skills they unlock. It's mostly related to charging, either in power or speed. Higher level charges deal more damage and can be eventually imbued with elemental chips to change certain properties. While they will be earned with time, the Z-Saber upgrades are worth grinding for early because this game is very unforgiving. The primary playmaker of the game is the Z-Saber because Zero's blaster is pretty fucking weak. This forces aggression and staying close, and Zero's a hell of a glass cannon, going down in 4 or 5 hits for most bosses, and the game isn't easy either. Honestly, most levels aren't that bad themselves, save the final big platforming challenge, but the bosses are fast, aggressive, and move a ton. While a hard game isn't always a problem, the game's life system is. For first timers, I unironically recommend save stating. Failing certain missions causes them to fail forever. Not only that, but lives don't restore on game over as they had in every Mega Man game before, and every one released since, including this game's sequels. Save with no extra lives, enjoy beating the game with none. There are ways to grind some out, and some stages will have them, but they don't respawn in stages, and grinding them out takes forever. They do not drop often. The optimal strategy is to reload after every death to preserve lives, but good luck learning boss patterns when you're reloading every 3 or 4 minutes. The stages are brief, but hell, the bosses are another fucking thing. The one alleviation from the brutality is another new system, the Cyber Elves, although again execution is a bit questionable. By performing optional objectives in the hubs or levels, such as killing certain enemies or finding them in stages, Zero can obtain Cyber Elves, some of which need to be fed currency dropped from enemies to become usable. Each one can only be used once before it dies. Some give permanent upgrades like access to E-tanks and increased max health, while others give temporary stat bonuses or healing. Despite a good variety of effects, the system is fairly limited as Zero can only walk into a stage with 3, with no real idea if or when he'll need them. The ones that give permanent effects can be used in the overworlds. It's best to save any of the one-use ones for the very late endgame if using them at all, especially given that they're one-time use only. Plus, using them affects yet another feature, the ranking system. After completing a stage, Zero is ranked from S to F based on damage taken, enemies defeated, if he lost lives, time, and if he used Cyber Elves, and has his average displayed at all times. In most cases, this doesn't mean much besides bragging rights and some extra Cyber Elves, which are unlocked by having A rank or higher. But being at A or S rank will also cause bosses to use EX moves, more powerful versions of regular attacks, as if they weren't hard enough already. Mechanically, the game is very quick and snappy, incredibly satisfying to mess around with and learn and master, plus it has some very nice control options to boot, at least on the DS. I can't speak for the Game Boy Advance version. I'd highly recommend switching to the Type B gun controls, which map sub-weapons to R themselves, as opposed to Type A. R plus B is sub-weapon, or C, R toggles between sub-weapon and weapon on B, because Type B is both the easiest to learn and allows charging both the weapon and sub-weapon at once. Getting ahead of myself some, Zero is a game that I really like in most regards. The platforming is good, the weapons are fun, the Z-Saber absolutely fucks, and the bosses are well designed, but shit is so unforgiving that I really want to reiterate that it will fuck your shit up, and many people, even people who've played the other Mega Man games before, may be turned off by how difficult the game is. Zero's a really good looking game. Animations are clear and direct, which telegraphs necessary information well, which, given how frail Zero is very appreciated. The art style for portraits is real sharp and dynamic, and on the DS version at least, characters and bosses have their official art shown during fights, which is just absolutely wonderfully designed. Except for Zero's weird diaper thing. Feel like I had to put that in somewhere. Somehow, despite everything going on, the game runs well too. I never noticed any frame rates or drops, but I was playing on PC. There might be some on GBA. While characters look good, stages leave a lot to be desired, not so much in their design, which tends to be decent but bland. There's a lot of concrete hallways, but more so in the amount of them. While each trip through a level deviates the layout slightly, you're going to see the desert quite a bit, and the underground lab, and every other of the few stage types. Regardless, I don't think it detracts that much. It's obviously like a cost-saving measure thing, but they do their best to spice up the levels a bit each time. The music is fucking great. I don't know anything about music. There's lots of guitar riffs and heavy drums. Things are really heavy and intense and fast-paced rock music. It's really fun to listen to and keeps the pace up and just gets stuff hype. Before getting to the game, I'll give a brief rundown on backstory stuff. None of this is actually said in this game. Some of it is implied, some is from the sequels, and other comes from art books and stuff. Between the end of X and the start of Zero, the Maverick Wars continue, and Zero is put into hibernation for 100 years for analysis, which leads to the creation of cyber elves, AI beings designed to help Reploids, and the Mother Elf that helped end the war. Neo Arcadia is built and is a place of peace, but eventually some spoilers for later stuff happens, and the Elf Wars start, which leads to Reploids being pushed from and killed by the humans and guardians of Neo Arcadia, led by X, who's using his power to destroy Reploids who he sees as a threat to his utopia. That pretty much leads directly into the opening. A girl, a human named Seal, and the only human ally to the Reploids is being chased through an underground laboratory. Finally, she finds what she's looking for, Zero, who's in a bad state. A cyber elf sacrifices itself to revive Zero and save Seal. Zero's unsure who he is. The amnesia plotline is kinda pointless. Zero is already 100-some years removed from the situation, so amnesia doesn't give people an excuse to explain stuff to him. Even when it comes to X, it'd probably be better if they had a more personal connection. Them not knowing each other takes away some of the potential weight from the eventual confrontation. To elaborate on X not knowing Zero, X isn't actually himself. While this is kinda spoilers, the reveal comes pretty quick, only a few levels in. Neo Arcadia's X is a copy built by Seal, made in good faith to protect the city, but whose sense of justice is corrupted, trying to achieve peace through genocide. This makes it so that when the two meet, neither knows each other and it lacks some weight. The amnesia thing is just kind of a strange decision. At one point it might have been different too. Up until the end of production, Copy X didn't exist. It was supposed to be the original X, but at some point someone at Inti correctly realized that it might upset people if the hero of the last 6 games in the franchise turned into Robot Hitler. Anyway, levels really aren't all that interesting to discuss usually. While they sometimes have Mega Man staples, death spikes, and pits, it's usually pretty hard to die in levels to enemies. I'm not going to talk too much about level design or anything unless there's something interesting going on, because for the most part, there's not. Not to say they're not well designed, or that there's nothing going on, or they're unfun, just there's a lot of running right, there's a lot of killing enemies, there's a lot of wall jumping over pits, and yeah. Most of this first level, Underground Laboratory, is more or less a hallway with some basic enemies. Outside of a small section where he needs to wall jump, which he's going to do a lot, it's just basic blaster training. What's a lot more interesting in this game, and usually the focus, are the bosses. Tests of memorization and skill. And while memorization is a little difficult due to Zero being a glass cannon and the terrible live system, a lot of these really push that skill. The game's first boss is the Golem, who grabs Seal. Only his head is vulnerable and Zero needs to avoid shooting Seal, forcing him to learn the wall jump and shoot combo real fast, especially given his lasers sweep up and down the base of the wall, which forces Zero to wall jump to get away from them. Once the Golem is weak enough, a mysterious cyber elf appears and throws Zero's Z-Saber, which instantly defeats the boss. As I said, this is going to be the primary playmaker for the rest of the game. The blaster is kind of bad. It has a function as a range tool, harassing certain enemies, but for the most part, the game expects aggression, and the Z-Saber hits much harder at the risk of taking big hits. Before heading to the next stage, the disposal center, go back into the laboratory and level up the Z-Saber to get the charge attack. Not only is it generally great, but it helps a lot against the next boss, who is a gigantic spike in difficulty to say the least. The stage itself is much longer than the previous and introduces many new enemy types, plus a unique gimmick where certain enemies will create wind that pushes with or against Zero across the entire stage unless they're destroyed. Aztec Falcon is the first real boss of the game and a pretty big casual filter. Falcon is fast and bounces between 3 moves, either a barrage of electrified spikes Zero needs to wall jump above, sliding up the walls which Zero will need to wall jump over, or launching spikes on the wall as he clings to it, at a downward angle. To add to the constant pressure applied, Aztec Falcon is a timed fight, because of course he is. 1 minute and 15 seconds to kill him before the kidnapped Reploids are crushed to death. Plus of course his gun absorbs Zero's bullets. Better learn to use that saber quickly, because the only viable strategy is to carefully whack him out of the fall down after jumping over him. This is going to be the first place that many, including myself, are going to start hitting the wall, and definitely not the last, but the first big hurdle. Once Falcon is killed, Zero gets his first elemental chip, Thunder. Unlike past games where each boss gives a weapon that counters another, Zero gets the elemental chips, which counter a specific different element. Fire beats ice, which beats thunder, which beats fire, which most bosses have and which can be applied to any charge attack, so on the blaster, the Z-Saber, the other 2 weapons that come later. They also have their own unique status effects on regular enemies, with thunder stunning enemies temporarily, opening them up for follow-up safely. To get ahead of myself, thunder is the best one and should be pretty much the one used exclusively in missions up until boss fights, but we'll come back to those as they come up. From here the mission structure opens up. Zero has 3 choices of missions to start, but unlocks more as he goes. These missions are permanently failable as well, causing the rewards for completing them to be lost. Order doesn't matter a whole lot, but there are easier and harder ones to start with, and some unlock elemental chips and the like, which are useful as far as it goes. I'll just go about them in the order I went through them, although it's not necessarily the best one. First off, destroy the train, chosen because the boss is weak to the newly obtained Thunder Chip. After the game's intro to pits, with the unique element in swinging wires that zap Zero if he tries to jump past them and cause him to fall straight down, which can be cut with the Z-Saber if you would like to get past them a little easier. After clearing a mini-boss that Zero can tip over with a blaster shot to its base, there's a short time section across the top of a moving train, a really cool set piece, but the timer carries into the boss fight too, adding to the tension. The Pantheon Core is weak to thunder, use it for bonus damage because Pantheon Core ain't a cakewalk either. Pantheon Core's pattern is pretty simple, first shooting 2 small puffs and then 1 big stream of fire from its flamethrower, the best time to get some hits in, followed by raising platforms up to spikes in the ceiling. Best case scenario, Zero can walk forward slowly to avoid it, but it's also possible to wall jump out if stuck. Like in most Mega Man games, spikes are an instant kill, which is the real danger to the core. It's honestly not that difficult, but learning the boss can be a bit tricky given how it comes after a timed section and the whole instant death spike thing. Once the train is gone, Zero gets another level choice. Occupy Factory's first half isn't bad, wide open, surprisingly few enemies. If Zero jumps up to the top, there's a secret life hidden in the vents. The big set piece of this level and later trips through the factory is the lumber robots, who fly in a slow pattern over an endless pit where Zero needs to avoid enemies and zappers while jumping between them, which is tough enough this first pass through, but way more so in the later ones. Guard Erotic is such a cool design, a giant sphere with 8 prongs based on the Japanese myth of an 8-headed snake. Orochi. Erotic's prongs will morph into serpent heads when they're on the left and right side of his body. Orange does a melee attack, red shoots fire, blue shoots ice, and yellow shoots electricity. While Erotic can only be damaged by attacking its core, the individual heads can also be knocked off to remove them until the space where the prong would be points up, at which point it'll be replaced. Erotic is probably the easiest boss in the game realistically. Its pattern is very predictable and straightforward, and it only attacks the space directly in front of it, so Zero can kinda just weave in and out as he needs to. But it's one hell of a fucking design, easily like the single coolest fucking thing in this game. Besting Erotic gives Zero the flame chip. On top of the boosted damage to ice, it sets enemies on fire for some extra chip damage over time. Find the shuttle takes Zero to the desert to find a crash resistance ship to rescue survivors. The path there has a bunch of enemies, but it's not a very platforming heavy stage. At the shuttle, Zero fights Anubis Necromancis 3, a really fucking cool looking Egyptian themed boss. While Anubis may seem tough at first, and he also has an instant kill move, he's a huge pushover, especially if using fire to abuse his weakness. His 3 options are throwing his cane at Zero, which hangs in the air then returns to him after he moves, giving Zero 2-ish free hits depending on what his charge level is, spawning useless zombies, or most dangerously, rising pillars that close in on Zero must be wall jumped over. Fire attacks interrupt his moves really hard, and it's simple enough to pick an edge and hang on it, waiting for him to come close to tear him to shreds. Following Anubis' defeat, Zero needs to escort the survivor back to the base very slowly. I actually like this level, but it is very easy, probably the easiest in the game. Still, for a first time player, including myself, again, Anubis is a fucking massive wall. Find Hidden Base is another desert level, but shortly after starting it, Zero drops below the sands into an underground base. Once he's actually inside of it, he has a small stealth section where getting spotted by a basic enemy spawns one slightly stronger enemy, and he needs to find the 7 prisoners locked in cells and free them. The boss here is Blizzak Stagroth. No, I don't know why he's Russian. Cool design, he's gonna be hard the first couple times, but he's mostly a pushover once again, although his strategy is pretty cool. Blizzak's primary attacks are spawning ice spikes on the floor that damage Zero when he touches them, or simply leaping at him. Avoiding and punishing these, especially given how hard fire attacks stun him, is extremely easy. His coolest, pun intended, attack is shooting a giant cold ray, which has a compounding effect. The longer Zero's in it, the slower he gets, eventually leading to a full freeze. It's easy to wall jump above it, but even a few seconds in it can slow Zero down enough for Blizzak to get a few easy hits in. Taking down Blizzak gives Zero the final chip, the ice chip, which freezes enemies to stun them for slightly longer than the thunder chip, but seems to do a little less damage. After completing any 4 missions, not necessarily these ones, a non-optional mission pops up. Taking place at the disposal center, Neo Arcadia sent a giant Reploid, Hittite Hot-8 to destroy the place, and Zero is sent to deal with it, starting where he fought Aztec Falcon and following the boss as it slowly creeps towards the base. Hot-8 has 3 weak points, all of which toss out different attacks, 1 laying mines, 1 launching parachute bombs, and 1 spawning enemies. As he attacks these and they're destroyed, the attack associated with the weak point stops coming out until all 3 are destroyed and the boss dies. While it's another cool set piece, the boss isn't difficult, it's just slamming attacks into it as it crawls away. Bouncing back to mission select, we'll go through all the other selectable missions until we reach the end game, and this is where the bosses get fucking real. Rescue Kolbor is a neat stage. It takes place on a concrete bridge. A lot of it is enemy focused, but the collapsing sections of floor make for some cool moments. At the end, Zero fights my favorite boss in the game and the first of Copy X's Guardians. All four of these guys have great designs, all being based on X himself, but taking his design in different directions, which is really clever. Sage Harpooya is Harpy X, weak to ice, and one of my favorite bosses to fight. Harpooya swoops above the stage in the air, quickly shitting out wide slashes or going in for an extremely powerful grab attack. When hit, he falls to the ground and shoots out a rhythmic barrage of attacks that's so fucking fun to dodge, and if quick, it's possible to knock him right back out of the air after he's done, and just keep going through this little pattern to lock him in it if capable of keeping it up. Super fun fight, super neat design, and the others are also just as good, save one of them. Duel in the Desert has Zero fighting off an invasion in the desert. This amounts to cutting down tons of very weak enemies while not being able to move right for some reason, not that it matters. Fighting Fafnir is Angry Red X, the fire attribute, and as such weak to thunder. Apparently his guns are called Sodom and Gomorrah, which is fucking metal. Fafnir's not that scary. He's got the Flame Blaster shots, which can be hopped over. It has a Flying Punch, which launches a shockwave forward, plus he has a grab at close range. The attacks do a lot of damage, and his fireball patterns can be occasionally tough to hop over, but he's on the easier end of the Guardians. Protect the Factory, more like holy shit make it stop please. Immediately upon entering the stage, Zero fights the hardest boss in the game hands down, Hidden Shadow, Ninja X. He has no weaknesses, he's pretty fast, and he's got a lot of variety, either dashing back and forth endlessly until hits, throwing and then flying around on the giant ninja star while tossing kunai, or making illusions and trying to blend in. While finding the proper shadow among the illusions isn't hard, getting it to register is. Standing on top of the real one and attacking is usually okay, but sometimes the game still decides that one pixel of the saber hit an illusion and that's free damage for Shadow. Plus on the final hits, which can come anywhere between number 1 and 5 randomly, if on top of Hidden Shadow, that's some more free damage for him, from contact damage. This man is absolutely unrelenting and brutal the first few times. Fucking took me ages. And if not juiced up on the blood of Cyber Elves, it's gonna be a bad time for a first time player. The actual level is pretty fuck too. After chasing off Sasue with an X instead of a K, Zero has 2 minutes to find 8 bombs, 3 of which are hidden above the timber part, which requires jumping up to and then back down the moving platforms over a giant depth pit on a timer. This is the hell level. If you get past this, you're golden. You've officially gotten good enough to get through the rest of the game, because this is the hardest part. Stop the Hacking goes back to the hidden base. The previously icy water is melted and there's some underwater platforming, where Zero's jump height is increased at the cost of a bit of speed, alongside the risk of getting smashed by the shifting submarines. After smashing the computer, Zero fights the final and easiest Guardian. Fairy Leviathan is Woman X and is fought in the water, but despite this she's weak to fire, as she's ice attribute. All of her attacks are super interruptible and slow. 3 slow tracking projectiles that Zero can just jump over, an even slower tracking projectile that Zero can destroy with the sword, or spawning slow falling ice crystals above Zero, which can either be destroyed with the sword, or he can just jump across her absolutely mask the stage to avoid. There's spikes between the small platforms that make up her little section, her little boss fight arena, but given how gigantic his underwater jumps are, it's pretty hard to fuck it up. The final selectable mission is Retrieve Data. Back in the laboratory, there's a bunch of spinning electric things, but the level's layout is otherwise short and unchanged. Maha Ganeshriff is an Indian elephant in multiple ways. Maha can do a really useless hand slap, roll like Sonic while dropping bombs, or swing back and forth before tossing himself. Apparently when he's swinging, he can be interrupted by cutting the rope with the Z-Saber, which I did not realize, but seems a lot easier than trying to guess when he's gonna jump. Maha hits hard and threw me off for a long fucking time, but he's pretty abusable. If Zero gets far enough from the big guy, he starts rolling back and forth to just have to deal with one attack over and over again. On my second playthrough, I was able to get him damageless using this technique. Maha is a fun fight, and upon beating him, the lab starts to collapse, leading to a neat little escape sequence. After clearing this, Zero can go get the first optional sub-weapon at the base, the Triple Rod, a spear that he can point in any of the 8 directions, horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. He can use it to stab, plus extend it 2 times. Apparently this thing is good on certain bosses, but the route I took, which put this level at the last of the selectable levels, made me get it pretty late, and I didn't want to grind it up, so I did not take good advantage of this weapon. Uniquely, its charge attack is an anti-air dealie, where Zero twirls it above his head. After clearing another level after getting the rod, Zero can also return to get the shield boomerang, which when held reflects weak projectiles, and after charging it, it can be thrown like a boomerang in an upward circular arc. This one is useful in a lot of scenarios, and helps a lot very soon. After this, the resistance base is attacked, and after saving the scientist, Zero gets straight to the boss, Hanu Machine, Journey to the West robot. Cute design, and the fight is realistically not that bad. His flame dash is pretty easy to dodge by hanging out in corners, and his flame wheel doesn't hit very hard, but his fucking babies are the real issue. Little fuckers grab onto Zero and rack up damage and stall him in place for some free hits. The rod probably nukes the monkeys pretty well, but I'm stupid and didn't decide to use it. The boss is pretty decent, but I hate the minion spawning. It's just like, stop it. That's the end of this mission, so on to the end game. Zero resolves himself to end Neo Arcadia, but there's no way to get up there until the mysterious cyber elf that gave Zero his saber fixes the transporter to allow Zero to warp in. Neo Arcadia Shrine mixes in light platforming and bosses, electric orbs again, then these weird stone soldiers that fly in circles and shoot wimpy projectiles, and then up the hills to the first real boss, Asura Basura. Based on the Buddhist titan Asura, Basura either jumps at Zero, rapid slashes, or spins like a top. His little shield also blocks projectiles, so this is another one that requires the sword, more or less. While he hits hard as shit, basically everything he does can be dodged with wall jumps, and he takes a bunch of stun off thunder attacks. I really love the design though, the 3 swords and the spinning. That shit gets me, that's a fun fucking fight. The disappearing block section after is pretty precise, but there's no real punishment for failing, just falling back down to the bottom and having to start over. The boss of the shrine is Herculeus Ancrotus, a giant beetle that's really fucking fun to fight. Herc loves electricity, tossing out his arms to make long electric wires before charging into the middle or blasting out orbs of electricity, the largest of which tracks Zero. After he smashes into walls, he leaves himself pretty open to charged ice attacks. You know, he's fun to play around. I really love wall jumping over him and making him crash into walls, it's really satisfying. And also beetles are just fucking cool, so like, you know. Neo Arcadia Tower is the final platforming challenge of the game. Like a lot of Mega Man end stages, there's spikes, 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 moving platforms, spikes, electrified boxes to jump between, and spikes. It's a fun send-off to the platforming, if a little frustrating. The boss is Rainbow Devil, and fuck, his design is so good. He takes design cues obviously from the classic Yellow Devil, but his eye is a giant X head. He also slowly shifts colors throughout the fights. Such a great design. Rainbow Devil isn't honestly that hard. His grab attack is slow as hell and easy to wall jump over. Tossing his little babies out is also very easy to avoid with wall jumps, and while the head bouncing is cool and the splitting on hit is a nice risk reward for attacking, plus the little detail that Zero can only hurt the one with the core in it is a nice touch. Hanging out in the corner makes this attack also very easy to avoid. Rainbow Devil absolutely fucks visually and the fight is fun, but he's surprisingly manageable even on a first playthrough. Most of these bosses I'm talking about, I did 2 playthroughs. The first time was very difficult, the second time a lot less so. Rainbow Devil's also weak to fire, forgot about that. After the Rainbow Devil is gone, Seal appears and begs Zero to be safe, feeling guilt over making Copy X and causing the issues the world faces. It's kinda cute that she worries so much. She doesn't have much of a character, but they make her likable in her few little appearances. The final stage, Neo Arcadia Core, is the obligatory boss rush stage. In the first room, Anubis necromancies 4, because he brought himself back to life. He is a necromancer after all. Blizzak Staggeroff, Herculeus Ancrotus, and Maha Ganesharif, all unchanged, with the second containing the 4 guardians, with the only change being that Hidden Phantom has a kamikaze attack when he dies. Finally, Zero reaches Copy X. The two argue. X believes that he's the hero because he brought peace. Zero argues that the real X is the hero because he wouldn't bring peace about the way that Copy X has. With that, the two go head to head. Copy X, like X, can use multiple copy abilities he swaps to mid-battle, while in all 3 using a slide attack and air dashes to harass Zero. His normal form shoots buster shots or charge busters. His other forms are all based on abilities from X1. Ice form shoots projectiles that burst into small pieces when they hit a wall like the shock on ice. Electric form shoots a tracking electric orb like Electric Spark. And fire shoots a curved flamethrower like the Fire Wave. Copy X is aggressive, but can be baited into chasing Zero around to get fairly free hits, despite how fast he can kill Zero if not careful. Upon his defeat, Zero mocks Copy X, going so far to say that even though he can't remember X, he knows he wasn't as weak as Copy X. It's a very badass moment, although I still would have preferred they did not go with the amnesia angle. I think it would have been a lot more impactful if he did remember the original X. And it kind of falls into a soul versus body thing that comes up in later games, but that's outside the scope of this video for now. Copy X goes final form, turning into an Evangelion unit. Angel X is a great final boss. Shit's hard as fuck if you don't know what you're doing. It is a very good final boss in the regard that it will fucking kick your ass. He levitates menacingly behind Zero and only his head is vulnerable to attack. It's also worth noting that for whatever reason he's weak to ice. The stage around Zero falls apart, leaving only one small platform, and Zero needs to dodge rings that hold him still, which are especially dangerous if off the stage, jump off the burning floor, or avoid lasers while wall jumping off moving platforms to get up to X's face. It's hard, it's tense, it's fun, it looks fucking fantastic, and is the perfect finale. In a final desperate attempt to remove Zero, Copy X self-destructs. Zero lands in the desert where the mysterious cyber elf that helped him reach Neo Arcadia reveals himself as X's soul and asks for rest while Zero keeps fighting. It's a nice little reveal and a cute reunion for the pair. With that, Zero keeps fighting to some cool ass music and the credits roll. Outside of the many cyber elves to find, the game also has 2 alternate modes. After beating the game, a hard mode is unlocked. Zero takes more damage, can't level up his weapons, and can't use elemental chips or full charge attacks. The game already pushed me to my absolute limit, and I cannot imagine doing this anytime soon. It is a lot. If Zero clears the game after using every single cyber elf, including the bonus one for beating the game without using any cyber elves but collecting them all, he gets ultimate mode. All cyber elves are already collected at the start of the game and activated for permanent effect ones like sub-tanks and health increases, and weapons all begin at max level the second Zero gets them. It's a cool reward and it makes the game a breeze. Feels like a real turnaround, getting some revenge on the game that kicked my ass so hard the first time through. I didn't unlock Ultimate Mode naturally though. On the DS Mega Man Zero Collection, the easy scenario where all 4 games are played through straight, Zero starts in Ultimate Mode plus he gets unlimited lives, which on the one hand it does address my issue with the live system. On the other hand, I do not believe first time players should have all this shit at their disposal, because it is very fucking broken to have all that. I had fun doing a second playthrough on casual, honestly. After all the difficulty pushing through the first time, it was really neat to turn it around and stomp stuff and run through it very quickly. The game is very short if you know what you're doing. My recording time was 2 hours, but that was with pauses and bathroom breaks. My in-game time was under an hour and a half. The first time through is not going to be anywhere near that short because it is incredibly fucking difficult, but it was a very fun reward for going through the game normally the first time. It's so ridiculously easy that I'd recommend not doing it as a first play, but it is a fun god mode run. I suppose on the one hand you could use it to learn boss patterns, but given how complacent it can make you, I don't know if it's a good learning tool. It unironically feels like cheating, it's just god mode. Apparently the new collection that's on everything also has this mode, as well as an optional mode that adds checkpoints, and these 2 modes can be combined if a player wishes, as well as a mode that makes pits not instant death. Putting all these on is probably excessive. The pits one is definitely excessive. I would say if you have the new collection, try it with the checkpoint mode, which probably helps a whole lot. Alright, manga time. Gotta play less Japanese games. The manga is weird. It's strangely comedic for what it is. Mega Man Zero, the game, doesn't focus much on its story, but the dichotomy of Zero and X's ideals of peace could be interesting if expanded on, but here the manga is like Zero hangs out with a toddler and has amnesia, which is represented with him being a scaredy cat when he loses his helmet. Not that I think he needs to or should always be brooding or anything, but it just derails the story with this lame gimmick, especially when most chapters are like, come on Zero, turn into good Zero and save us instead of wimpy Zero. Then he one-shots the enemy and it's over. And that's before getting into the art, which is sometimes tolerable and cool in the fights, but as it goes on, characters including Zero get more and more super deformed and chunky and awkward and goofy. It's such a weird direction to take the series, honestly. The action starts off cool, but it kind of falls apart towards the end as it just gets more and more into the gimmick. It's also really not that similar to the games in plot. Neo Arcadia is weirdly a non-factor, the Guardians are just like weird cops. Seal is the only semi-competent character, but she's a weird psychopath and a giant bitch for some reason. She tries to murder Zero the first time she meets him. The main villain of the 0-1 arc is Seal, Seal's evil sister. It's really fucking stupid and just serves to absolve Seal of the guilt of having created Copy X. Also, Copy X is a weird fusion of the Guardians, because why not? And after he's defeated, Seal and Seal make up off screen and it ends very abruptly. The rest of the manga is more 0-3 stuff, so I'm not going to read any further. The manga is messy and awkward, don't read it. It's not good. Alright, final thoughts. Zero came at a surprisingly good time for Mega Man, Battle Network was chugging along to great success, and after Zero, interest got a huge bump. The X series came back to bad results, and the Zero sub-series would get 3 sequels to boot, and it's easy to see why. Zero's fast-paced and exciting, the gameplay is super fucking solid. There's an interesting story core in there, even if the story presentation is barely there. Each and every boss is unique and exciting, and learning them is so much fun. I wish... I wish that the game was a little more lenient towards actually learning the boss patterns, because the bosses are definitely the highlight of every single level in this game. I don't know if it's fair to complain about the difficulty in general. The developers clearly intended and outright said that the game was intended to be incredibly difficult, although I know that's going to push some people away. It's fine to make hard games that aren't for everyone, but what isn't fine is the fucked up live system. If you do decide to tackle this game, either use the checkpoint system in the new version, or if you're emulating or something like that, give yourself a save state before a boss so that you don't fuck yourself on the stupid lives. Being able to fail missions permanently is very fucking stupid, and being able to get stuck with 0 lives basically permanently is completely fucked. Regardless, I don't think there's a lot of negatives to the game. Like, the times where I was getting good at 0 were just like incredibly fucking fun and exhilarating. Taking down a gigantic wall like Hidden Shadow or Aztec Falcon just felt fucking fantastic. The game is fast paced, the platforming is really fun. The platforming itself is a little basic most of the time, but the wall jump and dash are just like such a fun combination of things, and using the Z-Saber is fun as fuck. It's kind of like 2D Dark Souls. I'm fucking kidding. The game is also very, very short. Just so you're aware, the first time through will absolutely not be short. The first playthrough is going to take a long time. There's going to be a lot of resetting and pain. Every time after that, realistically, someone who knows the game well and is competent at it is going to clear this game in no more than an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I guess if you're really dedicated to learning it after the first couple times, you'll be blasting through it, but first time not so much. Yeah, so Mega Man Zero, very fucking cool, very fun, looks nice, the music is fucking incredible, and I would recommend you play it. Thanks for watching, and next one will be a shovelware pet simulator, also for the DS, so, yeah, bye.